What'll happen when a face from Matt Murdock's past will usher in a change for his entire universe as we know it? Well then, let's hop into the pages of Daredevil Annual Issue number 1 and find out together, shall we? Well, alright then, this brand new story from Chip Zdarsky is actually entitled One More Day, and yes, that is most certainly a reference to what you think it is. What I find interesting though is on the cover, the D in day is actually 2 little red Ds. As we join the story proper, we hook back on up with Mike Murdock and the hood as they knock over an armored car. And again, I see some of you scratching your heads right now going, wait, who's Mike Murdock again? And why does he look like Matt? Well, you see, back during the early days of Daredevil, Matt Murdock had created an alternate persona by the name of Mike. Basically, he was playing his own identical twin brother in an attempt to try and cover up his own extracurricular activity as Daredevil and to also sometimes explain how he was a blind dude who could see. It was back during the Charles Soule's run, though, when Matt had a run-in with an Inhuman by the name of Reader, that Mike, this fake persona, actually became a real physical being unto himself. Matt had contemplated erasing Mike, but he just couldn't bring himself to do it. Again, Catholic guilt, thinking, living, being, abortion allegory, etc., etc. The Kingpin had scooped up Mike Murdock at the end of that story and sent him to go to work for the Hood, the magical crime boss. However, as we discover, Mike has really only been working for this guy so he can get close to one of his Norn Stones. What's a Norn Stone? Well, it's a magical Asgardian artifact that Sif and Loki would occasionally hand out to mortals. They could basically grant you a wish, but they would come at a terrible cost too. Mike wants to steal this stone for himself, essentially so he can become a real boy, no longer feel like half a person, a shadow of something that once was. Getting the stone is just one part of the plan, though. He also needs a magic spell book, which he hires Black Cat to steal for him. This is a funny little exchange because Black Cat just assumes that she's working with Matt, but that for some reason he's just trying and failing to obfuscate his identity. And with that, the table is set for an arcane ritual, one that will rend the walls of reality and remake them in a new image.
What could possibly go wrong?
Man, you know, first Spider-Man sacrifices his marriage to change his own personal history, then Moira and the X-Men use Groundhog Day-style time travel to change all of mutant history. Now this, man, changing your personal history is just very hot right now. And essentially from here, the rest of the book is just the Daredevil origin story that we all know and love, only this time Mike was here the entire time. From Matt's mom running off to the convent after she suffered postpartum depression, leaving Batlin Jack Murdock to raise not 1 but 2 kids. Matt still pretty much grew up to be the same Matt we always knew from the original canon, but Mike was different though. He was a scrapper, a schemester, a con artist. Basically the polar opposite of Matt in every single way, which is interesting considering that Matt had created Mike to basically be his own Matches Malone style down and dirty persona. Now it's here where the new wrinkles actually start getting interesting. You see, Mike was supposed to be attending summer school, but he paid his brother $30 to go in his stead because they look so much alike. Unfortunately, it was when walking back from summer school that Matt had his fateful run-in with that chemical truck. Which means that Mike always grew up blaming himself for what happened to his brother. It gets even crazier still when their mom, the nun, actually shows back up again, in a scene that we always so often see referenced in flashbacks half remembered by Matt himself, only this time Mike remembers them clear as a bell. Now, while after losing his eyesight, Matt ended up really buckling down, paying attention in school, and eventually starting on the path of becoming a lawyer, Mike went the other way completely, falling further and further into criminality. His boxer father would routinely have to rescue him from danger, and eventually, once he realized that his son was gonna grow up dumb and scrappy like him, he figured that he might as well teach him how to fight. It's right around here too we see that Mike, unlike Matt, who didn't have a lot of friends growing up in his Hell's Kitchen neighborhood, actually did have one very good friend, a particularly slow kid named Butch. This isn't particularly important now, but trust me, it's gonna be very important by the end of all of this. Now you're probably wondering, where was Mike Murdock on the fateful night that Batlin Jack Murdock was killed when he refused to throw that fight for the Fixer? Well, wouldn't you know it, Mike was actually laying down money on his father to win. Furthermore, Leland Owsley in his original costume was also there with the Fixer that night, and it was implied that Owsley was able to put 2 and 2 together that maybe Mike knew something about their father not throwing the fight. Though it's left open-ended whether or not Mike blamed himself for his father's death, or indeed if Matt ever figured out that he laid down money on the fight that night. From there, we flash forward to the present. Mike is hanging out in the same gym that his father trained at, and it's there he's met by Daredevil. It's also very, very important to note right here that Mike has no idea that his brother and Daredevil are the same person, even though their paths have crossed numerous times, and Daredevil has gotten Mike out of a ton of scraps. Daredevil has come to talk to Mike one more time before his big murder trial that's happening soon. Mike doesn't want anything to do with him though, and ends up pushing him away, breaking Matt's heart. Perhaps the particular reason though that Mike was so short with Daredevil is that he was expecting another guest at this time, Butch, all grown up, who, as we realize, hey, we've actually seen this guy before. He was one of the guys in the Owl's gang. And now that the Owl is gone, carted off to prison at the end of the previous arc, his territory is all up for grabs, and Butch and Mike want to make their own power play right now. But not just for themselves, you see, for the memory of their fathers, Battling Jack Murdock, and also Wilson the Kingpin Fisk. Yeah, that's right, Butch is Kingpin's son. Meaning that when Mike changed history to make himself truly exist, it had a butterfly effect. He ended up changing other people's lives too as the comic comes to a close. And so that was Daredevil Annual Issue number 1, and by God, Chip Zdarsky delivered one a hell of a retconning powerhouse. One that actually comes with a little cheekiness to it, what with naming this one One More Day after one of the most controversial Spider-Man stories ever told. In fact, you know what? Between the stuff Hickman is doing in X-Men and Al Ewing is doing over in Immortal Hulk, it's going to be really hard at the end of this year to decide who did the better, bigger, sweeping retcon. This literally changes pretty much everything about Daredevil's life, and yet also doesn't change all that much, which probably makes it one of the better retcons because of that. Gotta take my hat off to Zdarsky for picking up this loose thread from the Soul Run and actually truly integrating it in his own story, in fact making his story much deeper and more complex now because of it. In just one story, Mike is now a fully fleshed out character with his own wants and needs and pathos and own chickens, which will no doubt be coming home to roost sooner rather than later. Also, I know I don't talk about art enough on this channel, but man, Mooningham, I love that he did this and not the main book's artist. I like that it's scratchier and rougher because we're quite literally seeing things through the eyes of Mike, a scrappier, rougher character. And that a story about Matt's polar opposite should really have the polar opposite in terms of art. This is going to be an issue we're going to be talking about for a long time, and a story that has an endless amount of actual repercussions, but yet another reason why this Daredevil book from Zdarsky is one of the few genuine must-read books on the shelf right now. I would give this one a much-deserved 9.5 out of 10. This is excellent.
Hey there everyone, Kate Joel again, and I just want to thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. It means a lot to me. And hey, if you enjoyed the book I covered in this issue and want some comics of your own, might I recommend Book Depository? It's my #1 place for shopping for comic book trades. You get a great price, and if you use my link down in the description, you'll actually be helping me out at the same time. You get something, I get something, everybody wins, right? So until next time everyone, I've been Joel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.